Well, hey guys, I'm here with Dr. Cate, and Dr. Cate, thank you for being here, man.
It's fun
great.
for me.
Yeah, I love connecting. I was a student of yours when I was here, and it's always great crossing paths with you again. I know we were talking about this, and you mentioned that you've had so many conversations about faith in general with students, but also you kind of honed in on these three different ideas around faith. And I thought, man, students at large need to hear about this. And I wanted to kind of like see if like, hey, can we consolidate some of that, some of these conversations that you've had with students, and maybe offer it to them. And I feel like it might meet them kind of where they're at right now. So like what kind of conversations are you having about faith?
Well, it happens quite often every semester. I'll have different students, some that I don't expect, to stop by and want to talk, and they're coming to grips with their childhood, the direction for their life in the future. How do they understand their faith in the process of this? And so I talk with them as they work through that. And as a college student 30 some odd years ago myself, I worked through a lot of those issues and continue to do so. And so there are some things that I like to share with students. One of them is that faith is a journey. Okay. And I think that's what a lot of students come to grips with. You know, college is a time of growing independence. You're stepping out from under your parents' roof, and now you have to manage your time, manage your money, manage your classes, manage your jobs, your everything about your life independently. It's a big step towards launching. And that's also true. Students start going to different churches. Some have grown up in their only one church all their life. And so they've heard things a certain way. And, faith is a journey. The further we go in life, we realize there's stages to life. It's easy to spot childhood, teenage years, but then there's college time. But then after college, often there's marriage and family, raising kids. And I'm even in a whole new stage of life where it's empty nest. And now I have grandkids, which is like the best. Yeah. In fact, 48 hours from now, I'm flying to Atlanta to go see my brand new granddaughter.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, well, thank you. And see her little fingers wrap around my finger.
Oh man.
But faith is a journey. And we're not the same people we were 5-10 years ago.
That's good.
And, as college students, you're looking at things in new kinds of ways as you assimilate all this new information. And I often make an example of Noah, the story of Noah. As kids, it's funny, we decorate preschool and nursery rooms with the fluffy pairs of animals because everybody loves animals and watching animal videos on social media and all. But then as an adult, we suddenly come to grips with, whoa, we're talking about the mass death of humanity here. There's only 8 surviving. I mean, it unparalleled to any tragic, event that we've experienced in the last 100 years in our modern world. And, what do we make of that? And how do we understand that? And so, it's a good example of how, as adults, we're looking at it a whole different way than we did as kids. Yeah. And it's not just the story of Noah. It's so many other issues that we are wrestling with as we come to understand the gravity of life along the way.
Wow.
So faith is a journey. And, so where we are today isn't the same place we were 5-10 years ago, but it's also not the same place we're going to be 5 or 10 years from now. Yeah. And it's hard to anticipate that, but we should be on a journey. I remember the words of Muhammad Ali. He had said that, if you're looking at the world the same way at age 50 that you did at age 20, you've wasted 30 years of your life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because we should be growing in our understanding of our faith and in the world around us. And so, faith is a journey, and we're at different points on the journey. And even if you have a twin, you're not identical sidestep with them on this journey.
Yeah.
As we go through the struggles of life. But, in the journey, we will all go through crises. Whether it's at the end of our life, when we're old, whether it's when we're young or anywhere in between, crises happen. And that's often when students turn to me, is in the crisis of life. They've lost a close friend to an accident, or a sibling, or a parent, or God forbid, a child, those devastating moments, and other crises with relationships or employment, bankruptcy. I mean, there's all these various things where we suddenly find ourselves flat on our back, looking up with nothing to cling to and nothing to hope for. And just life seems like there is hopeless.
Yeah.
But it's in the midst of those crises that we turn, hopefully, to the deep roots we've dug with our faith along the way. It's not just what we've recited and repeated from our parents and our pastors.
Wow.
It's actually what we've thought through and struggled through, and it's there as the bedrock, hopefully, for those crises that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
So yeah, faith is a journey.
Yeah, I think those moments in life can be really crucial in strengthening our faith, but it's also like a space where maybe a lot of doubt can creep in, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, doubt. And you know, the interesting thing about doubt, we often think that people in the Bible were just people of certainty, walking around knowing everything about God and knowing they could trust God. But it's some of the most key moments we find surprising doubt.
yeah.
One of the verses in the New Testament that just always surprises me is in Matthew 28.
Okay.
So if you're reading the Gospel of Mark or the Gospel of Matthew, twice the disciples are told that after Jesus is raised, he will go before you to Galilee, and there you'll see him. At the Last Supper, Jesus says this to the disciples, and then the women at the empty tomb are told this, go tell his disciples and Peter, he's going before you to Galilee. And Mark ends, the earliest copies of Mark ends without mentioning that happening, but Matthew does. And that's the Great Commission at the end of the Gospel of Matthew.
Got it.
And, you know, great passage around here at CBU. It's engraved on our kugel and all the Great Commission. Yeah. But what's interesting, and I can read it to you right straight from the text, verse 16 of chapter 28 of Matthew. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. Those three words, but some doubted, just that surprises me. They literally, in Greek, they waver, they hesitated, and you would think that would be a moment of certainty. They're told to expect to see the risen Jesus, and he tells them where to go, and there he is, and yet some doubted.
Wow.
And it's in that context that he actually gives the Great Commission. All authority is given to him, and he says, go make disciples. And there's plenty of other places, like at the end of the Gospel of Mark, the women are told, go tell his disciples, he's not here, he's risen. And they went out and said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. They just, you know, they hesitated, they wavered there. Or, you know, famous doubting Thomas, his closest friends had seen the risen Jesus, but yet he doesn't believe until he sees for himself.
Yeah,
and just, I mean, over and over, we actually, if you look for it, there's people that had questions that weren't answered and doubts that weren't relieved along the way. Not that we should seek that. What I just want to say is it's part of human nature.
There's grace there. Yeah.
Yeah, there's grace there in the midst of that.
Wow. It's so easy too, when you're reading those passages, to think of those people that had doubts in maybe a lesser light. But it really is, when you think about it, probably a part of the Christian experience as a whole, right?
Yeah, it is. And it's part of the process where we work through this. And part of the journey is there's times in life where we can wrongly feel self-sufficient about our lives. Our jobs are going well, our health is good, our family is good. And yes, we are cognitively aware that God is the one supporting us for every beat of our heart and every breath of our lungs. But then suddenly just one of those pieces falls apart, and suddenly we realize we know, at our core being, how dependent we are on God.
Yeah.
And we have to recognize that at all times.
Dang.
Yeah. So faith is a journey. You know, it's kind of funny. Before I was coming over here today, I had a student in my office asking just questions about class and all, and some other questions he had asked. And he actually asked me, hey, Dr. K, what is your favorite Bible verse? And, you know, it was funny. I just said, without thinking about what I was going to say here on this podcast, I said, you know, at different times in my life, it's been different things. When I was in college, Luke 2:52 was one of my favorites. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and favor with God and man, which shows a good balance and growth and development in life. Yeah. And when I was in seminary, the sense of urgency and call on my life, Luke 12:48, to whom much is given, much is required, became kind of a life verse that I'd been given so much and I need to give back. And as a young adult raising kids, Mark 1:35 became a favorite verse, that while it's early in the morning, while it's still dark, he went out and away to a lonely place, a deserted place, and there he prayed.
Yeah.
You know, a disciplined, determined time with God in the busyness of life.
So good.
But lately, now as I'm an empty nester, my son just moved to upstate New York just this past week, my third and last child, away from here. And what's written in soap on the mirror of my bathroom is 1 Peter 5:5, and it says, God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. And through some different experiences of life, I've come to recognize how it doesn't really matter what our accomplishments, our achievements are. We're utterly dependent on God, and we must be humble, and God gives grace to the humble, and I crave his grace and his goodness. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's just the journey. So yeah, just this morning, a student was asking, what was your favorite verse? And I just realized, you know, at different times in my life, it's been a different thing.
Yeah.
Because my life is still on a journey.
Yeah.
And it's still got years, you know, Lord willing, to go.
So good. Yeah. I think about my favorite verses. Yeah. It's plural, you know, because it's different verses have resonated with me at different times of life, you know. It's natural. But yeah, you touched on this a little bit, but I think like I want to tap into this a little bit too, if we have time, is this idea of like faith also being like, you know, it's a journey, but then also through that journey there is like struggle, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the second thing I like to mention to students as they're trying to sort things out in their lives. Faith is a struggle. There aren't easy answers. We go through crises, and at times it feels like no one's there. But yet we have to come back to these bedrock truths that we've learned. In fact, it's kind of interesting. The older I get, the more I come back to the simplest things of life. Even though I like to study the complicated and advanced things, it's the simple truths of life, God's goodness and his grace in the midst of things when I can't see my way forward except through eyes of faith.
Yeah.
And faith is a struggle. Yeah, you know, it's kind of interesting. Years ago, when I first started teaching, I had a student, very astute student, and she came to me after class, after hearing most of my class, and she said, I have a question. She said, I have a brother who, growing up, he loved Disneyland and all things Disney. And then as a young adult, he got a job at Disney. And so it would seem to be his dream job, working there among all the characters and all the, you know, the rides and stuff. But as the longer he worked there, the more he became disappointed with Disneyland. Because to put it in her words, she said, the park lost its magic.
Oh, yeah.
He suddenly saw how the rides work, the people behind the costumes, the mechanics behind all the different things, and he could understand how it worked. And so she asked me, she said, you know, you've been studying the Bible for years, so does it ever lose its magic to you?
Oh, wow.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it was a profound question.
Wow.
Because she knows I've studied the difficult things, and sometimes there's explanations for why a passage is worded the way it is, or why something happened the way it did, or the way somebody responded.
Yeah.
You know, there's often, if we dig around and do our homework, there are explanations for a lot of those kinds of things. And so she wondered, in the process of doing that, has it lost its magic? And it kind of made me step back and go, wow. And you know what I realized? I realized that now as an adult, I read and understand the Bible in a way different than I did as a teenager. And that's okay and that's good. I've grown and developed along the way. But a lot of times what I see as the so-called magic in the midst of it all is actually when my students come to understand things I've seen. So it's no longer that childhood same thrill and amazement. It's seeing my students come to understand things along the way. And I told her, I said, I have a feeling that your brother, even if he's lost that childhood magic of the park, he can renew it by seeing it a face of a child
Through new eyes.
that lights up at the appearance of Snow White or something.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a Disney guy. I have a daughter that is.
Yeah.
So faith is a struggle along the way. And there's lots of questions we don't have simple answers for.
Yeah.
And there's lots of things that are difficult to explain. But that's the nature of life. It's complex, it's complicated, it's advanced, it's heavy duty, and we have to recognize that.
Yeah.
We don't just stick our head under the sand and act like these things don't exist. It's okay to say, I don't know at times. Yeah.
Amen. Man, that's so good.
Yeah.
I love that story too, because it just reminds me of this reality of living in a broken world, right? This illustration of Disneyland and kind of losing the magic. It's, when you pull back the curtain on almost anything, you'll realize nothing is as it seems, right? To the naked eye. It's never as it seems.
Yeah.
The only person that really is, or the only thing that's as it seems that it actually is Jesus, right? He is like the one that is constantly true, right? To who he is. And I love that example because, and just alluding to the simple things. I think sometimes we can make it so complicated, and it's really the simple truths that are the most profound in those times that we're struggling. Right.
It's interesting you put it that way because, the author of Hebrews says Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. And in my own personal story that I share with my classes, what was eye-opening to me and life-changing to me was when, yes, I had professed my faith in Christ as Lord as a child, but when I was 13 years old, I bought my first Bible, a study Bible, and I bought one because it had notes that explained things because I wanted to understand. I'd heard these stories all my life in church, and my mom was a Sunday school teacher, my grandfather, Baptist preacher, but I wanted to read it for myself. And at 13 years old, I started reading through the Gospels. And Jesus in the Gospels just captivated me. I wanted to understand more. And here I am, 40 years later, and that's still what I study on and teach on. And much of that is because there's a lot I still don't understand about certain events and things and why they happened and were the way they were. So,
That's so good.
Yeah.
There was a third thing that, a third characteristic of faith that you had talked about a little bit, just in our conversations. And I love this idea that, faith is like this very personal, like almost existential thing, right?
Yeah.
Can you I know I'm kind of like leading you into this, but can you
no,
kind of
it's all
break
right.
that down a little bit
Well,
for us?
that is the third thing I like to assure students is that as you struggle with your faith, as you journey with your faith, it becomes your own, not just that of your parents and pastors, as good as that might be. I'm not bad-mouthing them by saying that. I've been those kinds of people. But it's so important for your faith to be your own, that you take ownership of. You dig into the tough issues and the big questions and read and study and think and pray and grow and mature on your own. Because we're not cookie cutter patterns of our parents and pastors. We're not going to, our expression of the faith is not going to be verbatim the same theirs was because our experiences are different. That's what existentialism is about. We could probably, each of us, list 3 or 4 different things about our lives that nobody else on planet Earth has ever experienced all 4 of those things. Because our experiences are unique. So even if you have an identical twin, your experiences are different, your thoughts are different, the classes you've heard from teachers are different, and all that molds and shapes us, and especially the crises of life. It's kind of interesting when we look at the Bible, we describe God's revelation in the Bible as a progressive revelation. In other words, at the earliest times, like in the days of Genesis and Job, their understanding of God was rather primitive and limited. They weren't thinking in terms of an explicit Trinity or a Son of God to die on a cross for sins. Their understanding was more primitive and limited. And over the course of time, through Moses, the giving of the law, the prophets, building of the temple, but especially in the crises like the Babylonian exile and the other crises the Jewish people faced, that's where their understanding of God grew and developed an expression that we see in the scriptures. And that's true in our lives as well.
Wow.
Yeah. Life, it's not easy. It really isn't. And sometimes we can grow up in comfortable situations and then suddenly be confronted with the difficulties of life. And it can really break us actually in ways we need to be broken. We need to be broken so we can be dependent on God in the midst of that.
That's so good. I love it's so freeing too, what you're saying about you don't have to be a carbon copy of
exactly,
this person or that person. There's a lot of great people that have been in my life that have, kind of shepherded me along the way. been like, father figures in the faith, and I've looked up to them, but also I know for my personal, journey through faith, and I'm sure some people can relate, maybe you can, but there's been times where it's like easy to compare, my life to theirs and think, man, I will never add up to, all these things that they're doing. Like, will I ever get there? And sometimes I think it can be discouraging. And so that's why I say like that idea of like, you will not be exactly like, this person or that person, that can be very freeing for someone that maybe just experiences faith a little differently, and their journey is a little different. Maybe they take some different turns here and there. I think at the end of it, it's like, I want to be a carbon copy of Jesus, right? That's the one person that I can really try and like, I'm not trying to copy paste anyone else, but I can look at Jesus and be like, hey, these are great principles. Like Jesus going off to rest and to spend time with his Father alone. Like that's valuable. That's obviously something I should be doing, right? But it may look different than, my dad did it, or my pastor does it, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
So
no, so true. It's natural for us as humans to admire certain people that are ahead of us on the road of life, and as Christians, we do that. And as we admire, we end up comparing ourselves to them and expecting that we're going to be a cookie cutter carbon copy of them. And really, that's not the goal, because we're whole different people and personalities. And what's crazy is if we go far in life and stuff and become teachers or leaders, people look to us that way.
Yeah.
And so we have to reassure them, you don't need to be like me. I'm just trying to explain what I've seen along the way. And so faith, it's personal. It's almost like Play-Doh, where the events and experiences of life, the relationships we have, the jobs, the things we've thought and been taught, it molds and shapes us. And it looks different for different people.
Yeah, that's great, man.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, any other, we're coming close to time here, but if there's anything else that you want to impart to us?
I think that, we actually see this in the Bible, the individual. We see Paul, we've got enough of his letters where we can see him emphasizing certain things in his earlier letters, emphasizing different things when he's near death's door and facing potential martyrdom. And we see growth and development in his expressions. And it's still, all part of the Bible, the Word of God, but yet God's using him at the stages of life he was going through for 15, 20 years, writing letters. We see his personality coming out. We see him angry. We see him joyful. We see him, encouraged, and that's good. That's the beauty of God in the midst of the experience of it all. On that journey of faith.
Man. So just want to recap just for the student watching. I hope you've been taking notes. And it's this idea of faith being, you said a journey, right? Yeah. Faith being, what was the second one? It was a struggle, right? Yeah. And then personal and existential. Yeah. Those three things for me, at least, have just been speaking to me and how I view my own faith and my own journey. Because it's, again, I want to just kind of end on this idea of like, we're all in process, know, and that's okay. It's a long road of discipleship. It's not like, you're just going to arrive, this long journey. So man, Dr. Cate, thank you so much.
Hey, you're welcome.
That was fantastic.
It's helpful.
Hopefully it was helpful for you guys and you gained some things, and we'll see you guys next time.